This is a reading from the Autobiography of Maria Valtorta. I know my mother and realize that just to satisfy her whim, she is capable of inventing anything. It does not matter if another's good name goes up in smoke. It does not matter if people criticize and speculate on the whole family. Nothing matters, provided she wins. Well, I attended the course in style and fashion, took the exams, and in spite of the fact that I hated the subject, like all who are not ambitious, earned the highest grades. But I stopped there because my health was deteriorating more and more, nor could it have been otherwise. It sometimes happened that I would come across Mario's father, and seeing that he refused to greet me transfixed my heart. Every time that occurred, I would be ill for several days, and then there was father who, forgetful of the part of my mother, using her power of suggestion over him, had him play, that is, the role of being the one who did not want my wedding with Mario, asked nearly every day, "So why didn't you get married to Mario?" A delight, believe me. On New Year's Eve, 1923, I went out to buy butcher's broom and holly. It was a misty, cold night. I had wrapped myself up in a shawl and looked like a Turk. I had my little dog with me. I went to Cavour, now Ciano Square. While buying the boughs with the small red balls, I felt a touch, almost as if someone had touched me on the shoulder. I turned round and saw Mario, who was coming towards me across the square. He was wearing a uniform, bundled in a cloak. I remained bewitched. I must have had a very sorry expression, for the holly dealer offered me his stool to sit down on, but I remained on my feet, convulsively grasping the side of the cart. I no longer felt even the pricks of the thorny boughs. At first, Mario must not have recognized me, wrapped up as I was in the shawl. Perhaps he realized it was I from my dog, so familiar to him. He could not get any paler than he already was, but bowed his head like a guilty man and staggered on. What a wreck, father, what a wreck! What had those two women done to my Mario? So robust, strong, healthy, young and honest, what had my mother ever done in leading him to distrust, lack of respect for me, despair, pushing him in an hour of prostration into the arms of a vamp? And what had this vampire disguised as a woman done to such fine youth? A wreck, bent, thin, wan, a lifeless gaze, the lines of his face prematurely aged, a faltering step, a wreck of a man, my Mario, not yet 27, sick, broken, he who just a short time before had been so full of health and hope. Notice, I told you this morning, I realized I have changed a lot, for I don't feel everything going topsy-turvy in me as before when I touch upon certain topics. But now, as I write of that encounter, and again see my Mario looking older, disheartened, wasted, passing close to me with his head lowered like a culprit, I feel my most vital fibers being torn away within me. I have reproached myself several times for not having found the strength to call him and ask why he had acted that way. I would have had the key to the mystery tormenting me, but I was left paralyzed, the pride of a woman offended, love swelling up tumultuously in my heart, and pity, boundless pity, in the face of his ruin. Everything contributed to that paralysis, and it would have been so good to ask him so as to remove from my heart the sting of his behavior, which to human sight has all the appearance of being a betrayal. But I feel that it is not. Mario was led to act as he did by a set of circumstances, reducing his offense from betrayal to weakness. He was then in the flower of youth, and, as he had assured me, to obtain me from God, had rejected all the deceptions of easy loves. I was the stake for his chastity. I must grant that I was more a soul than a woman. I loved him with my whole self, but without the ardor and abandon enthralling a man. Add mother's words, which perhaps corroborated some invented imperfection of mine, and which my excessive reserve may have made him think really existed. Finally, add on my indignation and disappointment over being ruined after such a long wait, and the fortuitous encounter, precisely at that moment of perturbation, with the infernal Russian woman, and I see and see if he was not of necessity caught in a vortex in which he had to succumb. I do not excuse him, but I pity him. I came back home with difficulty. I said nothing. For years, I had no longer been saying anything. The door of trust in my mother had been closed and nailed shut for years, but now I had God for comfort. I did not stop at the point where I was in Reggio. I had always walked towards God. On arriving at my home, I had very clearly stated my intention of going to church even every morning. I, in fact, did almost every morning, especially in May, June, September, October, December, Carnival, and Lent. Mother was sizzling, but I let her sizzle. I had also found a Gospel of St. Luke. Father had brought it home. There must have been some days devoted to disseminating the Holy Gospels during Lent 1922. It was a book with a modest format. I went around from one piece of furniture to another. With respect to the Gospel, I was familiar only with those passages commented on at Sunday Mass, always those, often explained without putting one's whole soul into it, and even more often listened to with less soul than ever. And then I was a lone elephant. I had and have to think over a concept on my own in order to really feel it. I thus picked up that poor little book, which Mother had kept dancing for months from one piece of furniture to another, and Father had been reading once in a while, took it to my room, and started reading it. It was the lamp placed on the lampstand to give light. Footnote, Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 to 16, Mark chapter 4, verse 21, Luke chapter 8, verse 16, and chapter 11, verse 33. The more I read it, the more I felt a new heart being formed within me. I have wept greatly over that little book, gentle tears rendering my soul fresh, as in the days of my childhood, in love with Christ taken down from the cross. What hope, what abandon, and what a longing to love as the divine evangelizer should be loved. I have never been able to separate myself from the gospel since then. It is my spirit's daily bread. I don't even need to read it anymore because I know it by heart, but I still reread it because I always find a new fascination therein. When I feel very bad, when I'm quite afraid of something, I place the little volume with the 4 Gospels, bought at the beginning of 1925, over my heart, and am no longer afraid of anything. From those pages, Jesus seems to be saying to me, "Fear not, and 2 things, do no harm to this woman." I don't know how to meditate on large or small books on asceticism. I end up reading them as good books, and that's that. But the gospel, if I experience a doubt, a moment of melancholy, I pray to the Holy Spirit, to whom I am most devoted, and then open the gospel casually. I always find a word to comfort me, or enlighten me, or give an answer to the need to know why, which is bothering me. The little book with St. Luke's Gospel gradually warmed up my heart like the flame of a comfortable hearth. Its heat spread through all my veins, all my fibers, pervading all and making Christ constantly grow in me. Rosie Broek, one of the few I understand, together with St. Paul, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Francis of Assisi, among those distant in time, and St. Therese of the Child Jesus and St. Benigna, among contemporaries, says, "When God comes into you, the fact is that you are already in him, for he never goes out from himself." Our aptitude for receiving his grace depends on the inner intensity with which we move towards him. At the very instant of our moving, Christ comes to us with or without intermediaries, that is, with his gifts or above them. We, too, rush into him or towards him with or without intermediaries, that is, with our strength or above it. Now he, in bringing us his gifts and bestowing himself, impresses his likeness upon us, absolves us, and frees us. At the moment of liberation, the Spirit plunges into the delight of love. I understand these words quite well. At that time, I was precisely at this point. God came to me. That is, my soul realized that he was coming into me. But that was because I had gradually penetrated into him, attracted by the very sweet magnet of his love. He had first opened an empty space around my heart, and then had attracted and bewitched me, just like someone wishing to attract our affection, with the additional factor of his divine perfection inconceivably surpassing all human seductions. He had then waited for me to respond to his invitation. After I had told him with sincerity of heart and firmness of intention, I want to be yours, he had moved towards me, and I towards him. I asked him for nothing more than to reign in me. I no longer asked him to give me this or that, but only said, Lord, do what you think it is right to do. I never see rightly. You act. I trust you. And Jesus had entered as friend, master, and king, bringing me all his supernatural graces, while I precipitated myself into him with all my strength, with much more than my strength, still frail, thinking that where I did not arrive, he would see to arriving. But even if Jesus had come to me devoid of all his gifts, I would now have loved him just the same. I would have loved him for himself alone, as I have in fact loved him for years. In his infinite goodness, at the beginning of my union with him, he wanted to help me with all the tenderness of sensitive love. With Saint Margaret Mary, I can say, my divine Master then made me understand that this was the time of our betrothal, and that, like the most impassioned lovers, he would at that time have me taste all that was sweetest in the caresses of his love. Sweet words whispered by his voice, with no material sound, but so perceptible to the spirit's faculties, mysterious caresses on the heart, stretching out like a flower to its sun, and dreams, dreams, dreams. Since that dream of June 1916, I had dreamed no more. Now they came back to me with a frequency that made me desire sleep as a second, wonderful life of mine. I have followed Jesus through the districts of Galilee. I have heard him preach to the crowds. I have passed at his side amidst fields of wheat, and remained at his feet with my head in his lap, while he spoke, seated at the top of a stairway. I have seen him languish and die in the Garden of Gethsemane, and on Golgotha, and I have received communion from his hands in lovely paradise, always with that face, that gaze, that voice, those hands, and that infinite, loving sweetness and sublime majesty. How many sweet visions! The fire of his charity penetrated me ever more deeply, and set me aflame.
All those that are going with Mr. Hallelujah to St. Francis table, I need you to come to Moen Hall immediately. We're going to leave in like 2-3 minutes. So please come to Moen Hall right now.
I burned to love him infinitely, and to make him be loved. I would have said to everyone, love God if you want to be happy. Love and let him love you as he wishes to. Do not place obstacles to his entering. Liberated and absolved by his love, like Rusibroek, I plunged into the delight of love, of this heavenly love whose gentleness, sweetness, and fullness are such that nothing can bear comparison to it. With all the bonds which had kept me charmed by creatures broken, my soul hurled itself freely and joyfully into the reign of the supernatural, and penetrated it more and more, and I have never left it.